All right, you guys, let's go have some fun, shall we? You know what I love about a clip like that, actually? Even though it's funny because, if you haven't gotten your curse words in, we got him in. But the thing is, besides that, what I love about this is that we actually need every type of person that has been moved by psychedelics talking about it. Because the way that he's talking about it is going to reach a certain person who speaks like that. That's how he comes at the world. That's his tone. That's his fire. And people are going to see that in him, and they're going to go, I see myself in him. Some people are going to talk about it in a real flowery way, and we're going to talk about it in a very spiritual context, and that's great too, because there's an audience for that. I'm going to be up here talking about jokes, but truly and seriously, the way every single one of us holds a role in how we talk about these things, because the way who we can touch depends on us, right? It's about willingness to come out of our psychedelic closet. I know a lot of people are a little nervous to talk about it, but I'd like to invite up now our panelists. Come on up, gentlemen. You guys excited about this?
Yes. Oh,
yeah. Take a deep breath. I know, you know what? A lot of this can feel a little bit heavy because we're talking about really serious subjects, but what we're also talking about is hope. And these gentlemen are going to be talking to us about hope here tonight. So you guys are technically out of order, but I'll adjust. Okay. Let me introduce our panel. I've got Chad McLean here. Chad used to describe himself as a walking shit show. Traditional mental health meds and talk therapy failed him, and after a suicide attempt in 2020, he found his way to ketamine, a form of psychedelic mental health treatment. The results were so profound and so life-changing that he left his corporate life in America and launched Mental Joe, a nonprofit apparel company to raise awareness around the use of psychedelics as alternative treatments. You can also visit Chad inside. He's got a booth inside and to the right. Give it up for Chad.
Hello, hello. We're not done cussing either. That's what us veterans do.
I thought about that with the fucks, and then the first thing is in a shit show. Okay. Next up, we have Martin Polanco. Martin is a medical professional and founder of The Mission Within, a clinical program providing specialized treatment for veterans facing treatment-resistant conditions such as mild traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, depression, addiction for those in the military service. They work with Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. They are also inside. Give it up for Martin. Next up, Terry Blevins. Terry is a former police officer and now the CEO of the Cannabis Security Company in Los Angeles. He's also a police reforming expert and serves on an executive board for LEAP, known as Law Enforcement Action Partnership. As a speaker and advocate for drug policy and criminal justice reform, he's passionate about reducing harm reduction through drug policy reform. Terry, thank you so much for being here. Give it up. Last but certainly not least, we have Diego Ugalde. Diego is a retired Navy SEAL turned CEO, author, speaker, and psychedelic integration coach. As the CEO and founder of the Trident approach, he coaches and trains executives, athletes, mental health practitioners, and veterans on elite level personnel and team development, utilizing the best of what he learned during his time with the SEALs. His teams he focuses on deep insights from psychedelic use, and I personally know Diego very well, and he's a wonderful human being. Diego, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, like Jacob mentioned, I think understanding why is one of the most important things that we can really come to this conversation with. Why psychedelics? How has it changed your life? Why are you here tonight? I'd let this question be for all of you because I feel like that's the best way for us to, beyond a bio, how we really understand who you are and why you're here today. Start with you, Chad.
Yeah, so Chad McLean with Mental Joe. Kind of like a lot of other veterans, pill popping, alcohol, just trial and error of just complete dipshit, low life, treating people badly, right? You had something to prove. For me, I almost took my life 3.5 years ago. Held on to a lot of resentment, held on to a lot of anger from childhood trauma. My dad was an abusive alcoholic, and through almost taking my life 3.5 years ago, impatient, and I kind of told my wife, like, I don't care what it is, but there's got to be a change. I don't care if it's petrified dog shit. Like, I will eat it. I need a solution. I need to move forward. And so in lieu of that, she found ketamine. And so ketamine was my catalyst into this space. And so what we try to do with Mental Joe is we create kind of fun designs to kind of talk about this space and elicit conversations. And as we become a profitable company, we want to write checks to Mission Within to cover costs and things of therapies for people that don't have the money to go through these. So that is Chad McLean in the short.
Love it,
and that's my
Thank
why.
you. Thank you. Martine?
So Martin Polanco, I'm a medical doctor. I grew up in Mexico. And as a teenager, I was exposed to psychedelics pretty early because my dad was a hippie. So I saw the value in these experiences. And then I had a close family member going through addiction. So I was trying to help her, and Ibogaine is the medicine that helped her. So I decided to dedicate my life to make it more available. I was supposed to become an eye surgeon, but I switched careers to work on mental health. And it's been a really incredible journey, especially when we started working with veterans, because they've been able to change policy, change the narrative around these substances, and really accelerate the acceptance and the wider use of these sacred medicines.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Terry, your why?
Well, like you mentioned, I former local and federal law enforcement officer, spent an entire life abusing my body and my mind by exposing myself to things. I was a homicide detective and a child crimes detective. Then I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, injured in Iraq. Just a lifetime of witnessing trauma. And again, I was sort of the same as I've heard others say. I didn't know that anything was wrong with me. But one of the things that happened with me was I started using marijuana, cannabis, for pain after my injury in Iraq. And it really opened my mind to understand. First of all, I realized that my government had lied to me, that cannabis does have, I know, it's hard to believe, cannabis does actually have medicinal use. And it really changed my perspective on things. That was when I joined LEAP. And all of you, just a shameless plug for LEAP. It's a nonprofit organization. Some of you have probably heard of it. It's a national organization, really the only organization of its kind, made up of police officers and prosecutors and other criminal justice professionals who advocate for reform. They get it. They're the ones that are saying, hey, we need to change things. We need to do things differently. But what we're doing now is we're really looking at not only should psychedelics as part of all drugs should be legal, but we're a little jealous of these veterans, to be honest with you. They've had a lot of success on these psychedelics, and we're kind of behind the game a little bit. So what we're really wanting to do is, we understand that police officers who have experienced trauma and violence in their careers are more likely to perpetrate that violence on the public. And what happens a lot of times is police officers just get thrown away like garbage because they start having these issues. And we want to try to find ways to, not to mention the fact that we have a shortage of police officers right now. So we need to try to heal the ones that we've got and be sure that, and we owe it to them. We ask them to face this trauma, and we owe them, an opportunity to heal themselves. So I think it's like our veteran on the video. I think it's about time that we try to provide some kind of mental health treatment for our police officers, and I think that psychedelics are the answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Diego, your why?
I never knew about psychedelics being used as a mental health component until I met Martine. Before that, to me, it was like all music festivals and Disneyland, that kind of thing. But when he invited me down and I saw that he was like, and I saw like people's lives being like saved right out from under my nose, I was like, what is this? And then hearing people like Dr. Stanislav Grof say, hey, I learned more in 4 hours of psychedelic medicine use than I have in 20 years of psychotherapy, there seemed to be something to it. Something I'm really grateful for in the military really in history has always been the guinea pigs for everything. It's like where a lot of tech is used and developed and kind of come to understand and that type of thing. And that's where physician's assistants come from. That came from Vietnam and using those types of, those levels of medical operational stuff. And now seeing this, I see like the more effort and the more time and the more influence that's focused on the military, all that means is that's eventually going to be, as far as I can tell, what spills over in the community, and it's going to be better for the country and the world really in that way. So by focusing in the military is not avoiding other people, it's so that other people can benefit. Like we have, this kind of seems how it always has happened that way.
Thank you, guys. So I think, yeah, let's give it up. I think we should start broad here. Is psychedelics new to everyone? Or is like, raise your hand if this is like brand new for you. This concept for psychedelics for PTSD, for instance. Okay, so a lot of you have an understanding of what it's doing. In what ways can psychedelics offer help to veterans, first responders, and family members suffering from PTSD and depression? Are there any success stories or research findings that we can pull upon? I'd love to start with you, Chad, if you want to answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to Martine on the research stuff. I mean, a lot of these retreats and stuff really have this stuff kind of dialed in, and they're doing brain scans and things of that nature when people are going through and doing blood work and things of that nature. So that's really kind of their specialty there. If you want to talk about success stories, you can look at 4 of them sitting up here along with Punky and Susannah, who were up here previously, plus everybody else in the audience that have experienced these for themselves, right? So I think that I like to say, like, proof is in the pudding. You know, like I said, 3.5 years ago, I was almost 60 pounds heavier than I am now. I'm completely off of all pharmaceuticals, and I look at family members that kind of begrudge us, and I say, hey, if you don't see this, I fucking can't help you out. Like, so there's plenty of success stories. There's enough research that, kind of like Terry said, it's time to turn on the faucet with this shit.
You're living proof. Yeah. Terry, there is something interesting. You're talking about law enforcement, and we know that law enforcement, you know, our understanding of like drugs, right? How has the law enforcement community adopted something like the idea of psychedelic therapy suddenly? Because for a long time, that's what we put people away for. So now the adoption of that, how is that going?
Well, it's really hasn't even started yet, to be honest with you. What we need more research. We need, legalization, access, so that the research can be done, because that's the way we're going to convince the people that hold the purse strings. And that's really what it's all about. It's going to be all about money in the end. And, once we've gotten them to accept the science of it, so that's ultimately the objective, is to try to be able to go to law enforcement agencies and these governmental agencies that treat cops and convince them that there's something here. And we've made great progress. I mean, the progress that has been made with veterans really has laid the foundation. I feel like that it's made it much more likely that we're going to be able to get some of this research and get some of this treatment for cops.
Thank you so much. So harm reduction is something I'd mentioned before, right? Which is safely doing psychedelics. Diego, who is psychedelics, first and foremost, not right for? If people are thinking about it, I think there's a lot of, we want to hope, we want to believe that everyone can get help from this, but is that actually a reality?
It's not in my reality. Especially as a coach, the primary thing that we do is we meet people where they are. If somebody is saying, oh, no, I don't think so, it's not up to me to arm wrestle them into the room to get treatment with this stuff. Especially for those of you who may not necessarily be familiar with psychedelics, you go to deep, deep, deep places that I never knew existed, and to force somebody into that kind of space is not ethical, it's not healthy, it's not, you may be, or your ego may be wanting to do the good thing, or whatever that is, but it can be harmful when people start to see this space that they never knew existed, kind of thing, and then a part within them also that they might have never known existed. It's not okay. The other thing is I've absolutely seen people who are the people who are attached to the whole idea of knowing. This, without getting too deep, the people who are attached to the exactness of what the dogma of their religion is. And when they see something that may, not always, but may conflict with that, that becomes absolutely shocking to them. And it's for something that they have been living like their whole life in this space, that can be very traumatic. And it's not something that's easily, like, you can't just like talk them down. This is something that, so for those people, so the whole idea is, it's not just those people, it's just the people who are attached to the whole idea of knowing, or like stubborn or whatever. I would say, I would take more time in just trying to understand what they wanted to do. If they are curious and just open to what is, those people have a much better chance of receiving the medicine in a healthy way, I think.
So one of the things that you were saying, though, right, is it sounds like there needs to be preparation. And particularly when we're talking about severe PTSD, when there's been real traumatic events, and now an unearthing of those traumatic events. If anyone's out here listening, wondering if this could be right for them, right for a family member, but that it can get that deep, how can one prepare themselves even before the medicine? And this question is open to all of you. I know, Diego, you work on this front, but gentlemen, feel free to jump in.
Well, I think it starts like events like this in interacting with people in the space, essentially to develop trust, because you don't do this alone. There's something that I felt like I needed to do my whole life was I had to do everything on my own. It wasn't up to anybody else to save me, and literally nothing could be further from the truth. We're not meant to go through this life alone. We're not meant to go through our healing process alone or anything. And when you start to go into the psychedelic space, you can do whatever you want. I would never say to do that alone. And in order to do that, when I'm talking about going to the depths of what we're talking about, the cosmos of what we're talking about, you need to be in a place with somebody that you trust, that has been around the medicine, who understands many things, and that can help you. You were talking about the preparation, just helping them come to understanding with what it is to be curious, what it is to let go, what it is to breathe, all of those things. Don't do that on your own, especially because when you're in it, there's no going back, and it can be hard. So you need to be in a loving, supporting place with somebody you trust, first and foremost.
From a medical standpoint, I would say psychedelics are not for everyone. There's definitely some contraindications when people are not in touch with reality, where they're hearing voices, for example. People that are bipolar, especially if they're manic, it can make them more manic. And for preparation, it's really important to look at drug interactions, because these compounds interact with some psychiatric drugs. The medicine that we work with, Ibogaine, has a lot of drug interactions, and it also has some cardiovascular risks. So there's additional screening that needs to be performed, and also continuous medical monitoring. So it's definitely a process and has to be done with a lot of care.
Great, you guys, thank you. Integration is something I'm sure everybody's familiar with that word, right? That's what we do after a psychedelic experience. Now, it sounds like you can have a truly profound experience like Punky experienced and how you experienced, but it just kind of cracks your whole world open. And then you have to put yourself kind of back together through this process. What can veterans actually, these are people that have discipline. This is, how can they apply their discipline, apply like their gifts actually even to their own healing in the aftermath of an experience like this?
I did not go the norm route. I did not have integration. I kind of went at this myself. I went through probably 5 or 6 different ketamine clinics in Phoenix. And now that I'm on the other side of it, now I can kind of realize why I went through those processes, kind of a guinea pig, if you will, for others so they can dodge those, those bullets or those bad ketamine clinics. But for me, it was after the psychedelic experience, whether it was MDMA, whether it was, a ketamine session, hiking was like integration for me. Going to the gym was integration for me. So I think it's different for every individual. And I got wrapped around the woo-woo of it, right? Like, oh, I got to do breath work. I got to do meditation. And then I sit there, I'm like, fuck, I'm not good at any of this. And so the gym was my way to integrate. I would smoke cannabis once or twice heavily during the week, and I would go into the gym, and that's where I started connecting the dots from a past trip, if you will. So each one was different, but a lot of the integration I kind of did on my own. I don't guarantee or want anyone to go that route. There's plenty of coaches and people out there now, but into the storm, like the shirt that Diego has on, just get after it and go figure it out. So
Mental Joe, right here.
There is something about, ultimately the psychedelic, it's so personal to every single person, and finding what works for you is truly a unique journey. I would love for breathwork not to be woo-woo, because it's quite literally just breathing, right? Like I would, let's hope we can get to a place where that's not a strange concept to just deep breathe, But I get it, I know. For people like breathwork, I'm whatever. Anyway, I'd like to talk about the scope of trauma, because you guys touched on it, which is, it's not just about the trauma on the job, right, Terry? It's not just about trauma that happens, from what we're seeing. It's not just in combat. There's childhood trauma, there's relationship trauma, there's just being a human being, life trauma. How do we integrate that and think about that when we are bringing people into the fold? How do we look at that holistically and figure out what's the right treatment for you? How do we prepare you, and how do we integrate this for you? This can be for Terry.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of my compatriots is that they have what I feel like are stacked traumas. They have traumas from, we all experience traumas throughout life. And then, unfortunately, what happens sometimes is you experience more trauma because of the way that you were treated. A good friend of mine, ex-NYPD detective, was injured in a meth house explosion, ironically enough. The fire chief standing next to him was killed. My friend almost died, a lot of injuries, horrible PTSD. He was on a complete cocktail of meds, and he ended up going through this treatment, and it completely changed his life. He said it saved his life. He was suicidal. He's off all the meds now. He's a very similar story that you've heard from the veterans, and he was probably the case that I know that was just the farthest gone and least likely to find any relief, and he's just a completely different person now. So, but as far as the other traumas go, I will say that when you have a facilitator, they won't necessarily just focus, and Martin could probably talk to this better, but they don't just focus on the trauma that you had as a veteran or as a cop. They focus on a lifetime of trauma as well. So
Absolutely. Digger, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there was a really cool study that they did. They were trying to figure out why in these small unit operations, for example, 16 people who go out on an op, all experience the very same thing because they're all standing right next to each other. Well, why is it that 3 or 4 of them were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder at the end? And they went through all this stuff, and after all this time, they found out that it was the ones who were not loved as much as they wanted to be growing up were the ones that suffered, which to me, now it all makes sense, but with the first time I heard that, it didn't make sense to me. Like, how is it? Because these kids had to learn how to build those muscles to be self-reliant and that kind of thing, but we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to be loved and nurtured and that type of thing, so when we don't have those, that means that our reserves and all that stuff. So, and I encounter this all the time, talking with mental health practitioners and executives and athletes, like, listen, dude, I haven't been through what you've been through, but here's what I've been through. And the one thing that I found in all this time and working with Martine and other organizations, Heroic Hearts Project and that, is there's, as far, I could be wrong, but there are 2 things that result in this whole thing, and that is being disconnected from the self and not understanding the mind. And that can start when you're a little baby. If you get a binky taken away from you, you're not entirely sure that it's ever coming back. There's no rationale behind it. The mind just goes down these spiral things that can cause this trauma, and if you don't know how to handle it, then it can be anything. And so it doesn't matter whether or not you weren't loved, or you saw your buddy's leg fly across the sky, or you got fired from a job, if you're disconnected from the self, like who we actually are, and you don't understand what the mind is capable of doing and what it's not supposed to do, that leads to trauma, plain and simple. No one's injuries are worse or more important than anyone else's.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Ibogaine's role in treating traumatic brain injuries and CTE. Martine, can you elaborate on how Ibogaine is helping athletes and people who are suffering with TBI and CTE from both a medical language and a language in which maybe some of us that aren't in the sciences can understand?
Sure. So there's a study that was recently published in Nature Medicine, which came from Stanford University. They did a brain scan on veterans before the treatment and then after the treatment at 1 month. And they also did a range of neurocognitive testing, surveys, and other tests. And what they found is that it effectively addressed traumatic brain injury, increasing learning, memory, cognition, concentration, and even executive function. And from a brain scan perspective, they really weren't expecting to find anything because you normally don't see a structural change after a psychedelic, but after a month they saw increases in white matter in the brain. And this was really unexpected and important because this means that these compounds could potentially be effective for neuropsychiatric conditions, so conditions that are not just psychiatric, but also involve biological issues like multiple sclerosis or long COVID or conditions like that.
You were already seeing that in just a month after psychedelics?
Yeah.
Wow.
And after a single dose as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, we've talked a lot of good around psychedelics, but the thing is it's not always the answer, right? There are still problems, and unfortunately, it still doesn't always go the way that we hoped. And things do still happen. And I would love just to, Chad, if you could talk about just a little bit of that, where it might be that level of hope, but there's still complications, and there's still people that might take their life after. There's still things that happen.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the integration piece that we spoke about earlier, right? If you don't have a good nucleus of folks around you that are going to keep guiding you when you fall off the train tracks, right? My wife, Carrie, sitting in the front row here, like, when I'm a shit show, she's like, hey, go on a walk, go hit the gym. So to have somebody there to check in with, and I think when you see people that fall off or might commit suicide after a journey or whatnot, it's maybe they didn't have that nucleus. Maybe they didn't have someone to check in with them. And again, we all live in this realm, right? We still have life. We still have to plug back in, and you're going back to a home that triggered you prior. And just because you did medicine, if you're not putting in the work of the integration afterwards, which is the most important part, we're going to fall off. So,
Anything else to add, gentlemen, before I move on?
I would like to highlight what you were talking about going home. Changing the environment is so powerful because you can have this amazing thing, and Ibogaine, for example, could stay with you for like 3 months of just giving you training wheels that you need in order to get your life straight. And once those training wheels come off, if you are literally in the place that caused you the trauma to begin with, it's not like those traumas don't exist anymore. They're just going to happen again, and the cycle will continue over and over again. So there's something very, very fundamental that needs to be understood about, okay, cool, you're going through this process, you're integrating the way you're supposed to be doing, awesome. What are you doing about the environment you're going back to? Because if that is not addressed or changed whatsoever, we're all doing the best we can, but that will help you do even better by changing that environment.
So legalization, I think probably a lot of people are like, how do I get this now? Like, this feels pretty still far out there, and it is. Right now, there's a lot of decriminalization that's happening. A lot of the states are moving towards legislation that could potentially legalize. There's funding, like in Arizona, there's $5 million of funding towards mental health research around psychedelics. They're prioritizing veterans and first responders. MDMA therapy for PTSD is likely to become FDA approved this fucking year. MDMA therapy? That's ecstasy, you guys. That's Molly. Remember the 90s dance party? This is unbelievable. And psilocybin mushrooms, probably 2025, 2026. That's still far away. And so I bring this back to you, gentlemen. If anybody here is like, but I need help now. My husband needs help now. My wife needs help now. What do I do now? Facilitators, what's available, what's legal, what can they do? And I'd love to go down the line if there's just, feel free to also like talk about your own organizations as well.
So, I mean, I'm a huge ketamine advocate. I think it gets a bad rap in the plant medicine space. I really do. It's a good entry point, from my opinion. One, a lot of veterans, as you hear the guy in the video there, right? You walk out of the VA with a fucking grocery sack full of pills. And so it's really hard to wean off that stuff and then go on a retreat and still be stable while you're getting ready to go to this retreat. So ketamine to me is a way to open up the door for a lot of people that are scared of it. I was a dare kid, for Christ's sakes, from Montana. So I was definitely scared of this stuff. So, like I said, ketamine I think is a huge catalyst to help people out on this. And then we on our website, so Mental Joe Apparel on our website, because I'm just the average Joe. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know anything about retreats or foundations or where to look. And so on our website, we have a whole resource tab that's dedicated towards podcasts and articles and retreats and foundations that veterans and first responders go to, and your average Joes. It's because I didn't know where to go to look for this stuff. So instead of, hey, buy a shirt, but we're going to educate you at the same time. So
Wonderful. Martine?
I would second that. Ketamine is the psychedelic that's legal now, and that's available almost in every city. For referrals to like mushroom practitioners, it's a little bit more delicate because it's still illegal, but these are more kind of one-on-one conversations.
Terry?
Unfortunately, because of our profession, the likelihood that it's even further down the line. But what has happened with some of the cops that got treatment is they went abroad, either to Mexico or Costa Rica, in order to go through the treatment. And unfortunately, that's the only options that we really have as far as law enforcement goes. So.
Come on, Terry, you know some people. We know you know.
Yeah, I know some people.
Yeah, they might, yeah, they.
Some of them are in this building.
Diego?
A long time ago, when I used to be on social media, this Facebook thing would come and like put a tick mark next to everything that you've done. And every single time I'm able to put my tick mark next to all of it except for having gone to jail. So I've got a mission, right? I'm gonna go to jail and I don't care what I have to do to get there. But I'm kidding, sort of, not really. But anyway, to answer this question, my broham, Christian, Gray in the back, and myself, we just started Psych Curious, which is for people who need this now and who want to get into early stages of psychedelic exploration in a safe and loving and supportive way. And so we're taking the preparation to the nth degree. We're preparing them well beforehand. We're sitting there with them in a loving, supporting way during, and then we've got a healthy integration program afterwards. Again, this is over preparing them for smaller doses, but it also prepares them for going for larger doses if they need to. Coming from the veteran community that I come from, I can't tell you how many times I've heard of active duty guys who are coming out of combat right now. So I can't get any help because I'm active duty. I don't care about that. I genuinely don't. Like, the worst thing that happens to me, I'll go to jail. Believe me, I've been in worse places in my life. So whatever. So if people need it now, we are an option. Our website should be ready tomorrow or something. But anyway, and also in the back, we just published a book. So if you want to have a private conversation or a conversation with myself after this, I'll be in the back. I'll be in the back with the books, and we can talk about this more. But it matters. That's what matters. A couple of days of no freedom for myself doesn't, whatever, who cares? So anyway. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. We're coming to the close of the questions, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. But I'd love to just go down the line. Last words that you just want to share with everyone about psychedelics, a personal story, any inspiration or like hope, really.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of hope up here on the panel in previous, right? Again, for me, something that just kind of came true recently is I had an intermuscular ketamine session roughly about a month and a half ago, and it was on a rocket ship. It's completely different than drip. But through that experience, my littlest son came to me in that and just kind of said, "I'm waiting on you, Dad." And man, I always fucking tear up here. I was laying in bed with him about 2.5 weeks ago, and as he was falling asleep and watching him breathe, I said, "I love you." And he goes, "I love you too, Dad." And I leaned over and I said, "I got you." And his reply was, I know." And at that point, I knew I could hold space for him, and I knew by talking about this stuff, like there's a lot of average Joes out there that are fighting to find a better way of life, and we got to remove the labels on this shit, and we have to talk about it. We have to be a community, and we have to be a tribe of human beings to say there is a better way. So.
Even though this is a very hopeful and exciting time for psychedelics, I think it's important that we don't lose sight that this is psychedelic. It's a therapy. It's not just a psychedelics. Like, it's a therapy that's associated with it. And as a lot of for-profit, like large for-profit companies move into the space, they're going to try to cut costs by cutting the therapy. So it's just be mindful of that.
I just want to encourage everyone to support all events like this, online events, and really support legalization, because we're not going to be able to, we're still a long ways out from getting this. Fortunately, we found a way to do it for a lot of veterans. But what happens is, this is my big push, is I don't want it to just be a healing for veterans and for former cops. I want it to be something that we can give to these people while they're still serving, because not only do we want to heal them, do we owe that to them, but we owe it to the members of the public. We owe it to the members of the world that we have people representing our government out there that are in a good headspace.
I think one of the things that I'm most hopeful for is that it's just not psychedelics that create this. There's holotropic breathing, there's sensory deprivation tanks, there's vision quests. The point is, it's exposing people to elevated states of consciousness that is what brings about the healing. So the more that we are all, as a culture, exposed to these higher states of awareness, the more as a culture we can heal. They call it post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't think that it's post-traumatic anything. I think it's pre-traumatic stress, where we are so twisted and we are so out of balance. We are so unaware on how to manage ourselves. So when trauma happens, we're then twisted up and we don't know how to respond to this. I think our culture is in a state of disorder now, and we have the ability through psychedelics, through holotropic, through all these things, to regain balance, so that when the traumas of life happen, because it's going to happen as a function of life, it's okay. No matter what it is, it's okay. Or even if it's this very, very terrible thing, when somebody has a deep connection to self, when somebody has a deep awareness of the mind tricks that are going on, you may peak, but it's not for very long, and you can just be. Just be. And you don't need psychedelics to do that. They're just helpful.
We'd like to open it up for some audience questions. Anybody have a burning question that you want to ask any of these gentlemen?
Hi, my name's Jordan Jarvis. I run an organization called Revelations LLC. It's to basically help people live their passion and do that through love, through their hearts, because as you were just saying, Diego, the more elevated we can be as a society, the better we can heal. So earlier we were discussing that a approaching psychedelics isn't necessarily appropriate for everybody, and that it can be an extremely intense experience. What do you think about, Martine, about things like the DMT cartridges or nitrous oxide, where people have an ability to kind of more or less put their tiptoes into the jacuzzi first, rather than just go full dive into the deep end? Do you feel there's adequate medical benefit in, with counseling and other steps and measures, introducing psychedelics to people with less mental stability through these potential tiptoe methods?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say DMT is the tiptoe method, but
Via through a vaporizer cartridge, you can have a controlled and slowed small dosage, as opposed to like high dosage experiences. Like you can get a 2 or 5 or 10 milligram puff versus.
yeah, no, I think microdosing is a great tool, and it actually also helps some of the veterans when they're trying to taper off their psychiatric medications. You can start substituting, one drug for the other, one medicine for the other. Yeah, I do believe in microdosing, but again, it's not for everyone. I think some people get more anxious and have just a lot of emotion come up, and they don't have that container. They don't have the therapeutic support to be able to handle this. So it's a double-edged sword.
Hi, thank you very much. I wonder if you could talk about sort of how it is, what the psychological effect of psychedelics that allows for the healing to take place, and perhaps how the particular therapies complement that psychological process.
Number one is just awareness, right? Just aware of what is, and more importantly, aware of what is not. That causes, and I was saying before, and I really fundamentally believe this, that the two things that are at the root, I'm not saying that I'm right, I think that the two things that are at the root of all suffering is being disconnected from who we actually are, but beyond to thinking who we really are, and not understanding the mind. And what psychedelics do is sometimes, not every time, no trip is ever the same, but what they do is they can show maybe a different perspective than for sure that I was ever aware of before psychedelics. I was like, well, I didn't know that's who I was. I didn't even know that I had an ego. I didn't until Ibogaine's like, here it is, dude. And I'm like, oh man. And then I spent years trying to work with that. That's how they bring about the healing. I'm not talking about integration yet. I'm not talking about coaching or talk therapy yet. They bring out the healing simply through awareness of what is, and then also awareness of maybe what is not, that I used to always cling to as being truth. And then for sure, these are not standalone. We talked about it before. Say it a million times. The integration is 1 billion times as important as the medicine itself, and helping to make sense of these things that don't always make sense in the midst of these experiences. For sure, those are ways that psychedelics are actually responsible for these things, yeah.
I've heard some of my cop and veteran friends say that it was more of an experience, almost like a light switched on for them, and that it literally was, their brain was reset. They said, and somehow that the traumas weren't the same as painful as they were before. So I don't know the science behind that, but it's anecdotal, but I've talked to quite a few that say that that's sort of was their experience.
And I got kind of an analogy that I use, and same thing for me. It was just a repeat cycle of thought process, and a repeat, this is who I am, this is the story, right? And for me, the psychedelics, what it opened up is, I look at it as like, all of us that have the mental health issues, depression, anxiety, TBI, right? Which is mental health in a group. You're driving down a frontage road constantly, right? It's just a frontage road. That's all you know, right? Because you have this default mode that's just repeating. As soon as you introduce psychedelics, it's like, oh, there's a fucking off-ramp I can take. And there's a lot more highways I want to drive. So for me to kind of open it up real quick, it's frontage road, psychedelic. Now I have this million-mile, freeway that I can go test out and think differently and look at things from a different angle.
That was awesome.
Could someone just speak to are you going to therapy side?
Oh, that wasn't going to be it. I'll pass it back. But it relates to it, I guess. For me, it was just about my reconnection actually to my spirit. Like, I began to hear the intuitive voice that we all have inside of us, right? It just speaks so clearly in those moments. Everything that you know that you kind of should need to do, you hate your job, like, or this relationship, or whatever it is that you kind of know, but it's just inconvenient. It's hard to think about. It kind of forces it to be like, you must look at this because it's for you. It's for you. And so I feel like I can't speak from the therapy side, but once it becomes so like, please don't ignore this because it's your own spirit speaking to you. At least that's the way that it comes through me. Do any of you guys have anything to relate specifically to the therapy side, like he's asking?
Well, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but from the felt experience of Ibogaine, which is a medicine that we work with, it allows the person to gain perspective, but also to revisit experiences that were traumatic, but without emotional pain. So there's an objectiveness to them, and it's almost like you're floating in the room, seeing what happened to you as a kid, and you're able to see not just what you did and what you experienced, but what the other person was going through. So you realize that they were also traumatized, and there's a unlocking and a forgiveness there that can happen when you understand a little bit more about the kind of the broader context of the situation.
I have a question about EMDR therapy. I got here late, and EMDR, from my experience, really comes down to like getting back into that experience versus neurolinguistic programming, where you want to be like here and now and future focused. So how does it relate in that sense, as far as like not taking you back to the trauma?
Well, it doesn't like erase the memory. It just gives you the tools necessary to be in the space of that memory and still be okay. And I think that's one of the most common comments that I get is like, oh, is this going to help make me forget everything? Like, no. What it does is it helps you through integration and all the work that you got to put in afterwards, is it helps you get into a place of not only accepting what happened, not resisting what happened, not resisting yourself, and then even developing self-love for all of this and developing love for whatever it was externally that caused this thing, and creating a balance, creating a strengthening that may have never ever been there before, and now you can be swimming in this trauma and it doesn't bother you. It just is. And so it's not about, like, there are therapies out there for sure that are specifically designed to be like, hey, you're going to forget this. But that's not what this is. And as far as I know, this is not what EMDR is either. It is just, it's helping you come to understand what this is, getting in that space, which is the most uncomfortable space in the planet for most of us, because there's deep fears, deep traumas. And that's why this is so hard, because it burns and it hurts. And it's my only now definition of scary. Been shot at, got my face blown up, almost killed my friends in a Humvee rollover accident, all this stuff, child's play, compared to just sitting in that trauma. But the burning subsides, the pain subsides, and then I can start to learn, and then I can start to grow, and then when I start to get stronger, like, show me more of that. I don't want any hidden rocks. What's under this rock? What's behind that door? Because that is the only way out. And then, but all of this stuff kind of gives you the guidance, and then through the integration, you build the muscles in order to just be, no matter what's going on around you. And that's the gift of all of these things, I think.
I think the key to what you're saying to me is integration, which has not been spoken a lot about since this is like newer. So I thank you.
Integration is 100% required, I think.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to all the panelists here. And I have a question regarding with law enforcement and veterans. I'm wondering about your experiences with the stigma around these medicines and what these challenges are to kind of help I know you speak to people have to be ready for it, but what are some of the avenues to help people have more understanding with the stigma, especially considering the governmental aspect of this?
Yeah, we kind of take it head on, to be honest with you. I mean, like I said, I got an apparel company, and we got mushrooms, you know, in a monkey sunglasses here, and I go to farmers markets that are at high schools, right? So you can imagine the conversations and the mothers and dads that come up to me, and they want to know, well, what the hell's up with the mushroom shirt, pal? But I think you have to take it head on, to be honest with you, and just be authentic about it, talk about it. Like, I own my shit now. We have a shirt that says "Own Your Shit," and I really own it, and I talk to people about it. And what's interesting is, like, through these little farmers markets and places we go, I'll be damned if there isn't probably 4 or 5 people that doesn't walk away with a ketamine clinic. That we have 2 ketamine clinics that we partnered with in Phoenix, and so they're walking away with some kind of information to go research, and they're seeing somebody, myself or my wife, that we both talk about, you know, our relationship and how MDMA really saved our marriage and things of that nature. People are curious. People are tired of living in the yuck. They're tired of popping pills, and they know there's a better way of doing it. But my whole thing is erase the stigma by talking about it. If you don't talk about it, we're never going to get rid of it.
That's absolutely true. I agree with that. And I mentioned before, you know, unfortunately, lack of access from currently serving police officers and service members because of that stigma. It's exactly what it is. But it's just events like this. It's educating people, the people that in the crowd that didn't know anything, and they raise their hands and they're here learning, and whoever's watching this. It's just really all about educating. This movement is amazing. I was a marijuana activist, but I can tell you this movement is really an incredible movement, and I feel some momentum. And like I said, I love the fact that veterans have been able to benefit from this so much, and I hope that we can eventually do that for the cops too.
Hi, thanks so much for being here, you guys. I so appreciate all of your information. My question is kind of about public safety, because it's kind of the elephant in the room that we all deal with, and obviously law enforcement's here to let us know. So we want to make sure this is something that's used safely. So do you have advice on kind of telling people about that, about dosing and other things with that? And thanks so much.
I try to stay out of that realm. That's not my wheelhouse. I try to partner people up with, you know, pharmacists that know this stuff really well. There's a gentleman by the name of the Spirit Pharmacist, and he knows these medicines inside and out. And there's a lot of retreats that really lean on him. So I'll tell people to go to his website, or I'll say, hey, go look at the Mission Within, or hey, go over to this retreat and go do that education on yourself, to be honest with you, because I don't want to overstep in that arena. So I try to be a networker for people so they can go do the research on their own.
One of the things that we experienced with cannabis was that there were a lot of cops. I'm sorry, I just drew a blank. I'm sorry, what was the question again? So obviously it's still illegal to drive under the influence of any substance. And so it's just really important that people keep that in mind. But one of the interesting things that happened with cannabis was a lot of cops very publicly said, if we legalize cannabis, we're going to have an exorbitant number of people dying due to others who are driving under the influence. And I've been tracking this very closely, because one of my biggest hesitations when I supported cannabis in the beginning was I didn't want to support something that was going to lead to people's injuries and deaths. But what we found is there have been multiple studies that have been done. Some areas there were slight increases, other areas there were decreases. And I proposed the same thing about the psychedelics. I don't believe that it is going to seriously impact public safety, especially considering that we've already seen these numbers from cannabis that they really haven't had that impact. So Obviously, it's something I thought about and something I still think about, and I want to make sure that we're not endangering people. I spent my life protecting communities, and I don't want to do anything to endanger that, so I'm following it closely, as it sounds like you are as well. So it's something that we need to follow.
I think also just adding on to that, just like it kind of goes to both your questions, right? We just need a giant, massive information campaign and a good one around it, around, I think some of the basics, like start with a microdose, start small. Don't send yourself in like you might have done maybe, like back in the day when I was first doing psychedelics, microdose wasn't even a word. We didn't say that. You just got an eighth of mushrooms and you just like did it. Maybe you did the half, and then people never did it again because they did it in college at a bar with their friends, and they're like, well, that didn't go well. And so I think right now the education is falling to individuals that are really passionate about it, right? Podcasts, and there's so many content creators. Use your discernment. The truth is that's that feeling, the gut feeling inside. Does this feel right? Because a lot of times you're going to get a little bit of information here, a little bit of information here. Unfortunately, we still talk about abstinence. And the minute that we continue as on the highest level that we don't look at it, this comes up with safety, right? Because we can't just, one big board can't say, by the way, if you take over a gram of mushrooms, you might be in for a trip. You might be in for less. But there's so much information, and so right now it's just find podcasts that feel right to you. There's Psychedelics Today, Third Wave, Trip on This, other psychedelics that are information, maps. There are big organizations that are researching this that are actually already putting out how they do their own clinical trials. Like if you're gonna do MDMA, check out what MAP's doing. How are they doing it? What does that process look like? And so, again, it's just like telling as many people as possible, please learn and discover dosage. Start small. Start small, feel it in your body, and then you can always, like you're saying, the jacuzzi, then you can start to move forward as you develop that relationship within yourself. So.
Hi, the work that you're doing in the world is breathtakingly beautiful, so deep bow, and I'm so honored to be here. My question is somewhat related to the therapy question, which is there a resource for people who are interested in doing a steady follow-up sessions of integration, where someone who has some clinical psychology training, psychiatry training in the sort of Western field, but also experienced perhaps with the sort of field of psychedelics or spirituality in some sense, and can help, because it seems like it's either I go through my insurance and find a certain kind of doctor who may not have no idea about one thing, or I go to someone who is spiritually advanced and good to talk to, but may not have a sort of grounding about cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that. Is there a resource or inventory of people that I could recommend to other people if they're looking to do more extensive integration processes?
You mean like groups of coaches or places to train?
So people who consider themselves clinical psychologists who are also spiritually sort of informed with the field of psychedelics.
You got two of them right here in the front row that could probably help out quite a bit.
I'm just to put my flashlight on them so that everyone can see.
There is a group out there, a company
awkward.
called Being True to You, though, that actually is helping people become coaches in this space. And my wife just got done with the program itself, and we are seeing some gaps where the integration isn't as long, or it doesn't go as long as we would like it to see. And she's got that feedback just going through the Being True to You course. And we know that's a massive piece, but I think we're a little bit more proactive on the psychedelic side to say, okay, this piece is missing. How do we get it there, and how do we elongate that? But I would say you have two folks right here in the middle, and then Diego and others that could probably answer that on a bigger scale.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm just happy to add, there's a reason why I spend so much time with mental health clinicians, because they have to unlearn so much of what they had to learn in school in order to one of the most common things I hear is, I now know that I'm not doing anything to actually help these people. Once I put them on mental health medication, that's it. I don't know what else to do. So I hear you. That's the common understanding, I think, in our culture. Like, hey, this person needs to be a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whatever in order for me. That's like the starting point. I hear you. That's like our culture. But I also have to tell you that there's so much that comes with these elevated states of consciousness where you start to get in this place like, shoot, man. I mean, like I said before, Stanislav Grof said, I learned more in 4 hours of psychedelic medicine than I did in 20 years of psychotherapy. So if you don't want to, you don't have to use those as metrics as people who can actually help you. The knowing is within you, and the most powerful thing you can do is to find somebody who can help you tap into that knowledge and healing that is within you, for you to find out where you need to go. That's what's most important. And I just got to be honest with you, there's not a lot of psychotherapists and psychologists and that type of thing that are trained, that are even aware of that concept. How do you find somebody who can help you find that is within you, that can help you get out of this?
Just to answer that also, so I don't know of anything that's actually like a structure of like this is where they go, because a lot of the therapists that I know that do psychedelic therapy as well, it's their license that they're worried about.
100%.
So if they're public about it, they can have their license taken away. And so unfortunately, it's a lot of word of mouth. You can come talk to me after. I know a few that like do that, but that's why there's not going to be a resource right now, is because it would be a threat. But they are practicing real therapists that also do psychedelic therapy, but they're working in the gray, and so they got to be careful.
And there's some that are giving up their licenses altogether and becoming coaches, because it's the only way they can fully help people the way they know they need to be helped. That's another thing to be aware of as well.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes. Yes, hello.
We got time for one more.
My name's Alton. I wanted to ask all of you, me also being a veteran, PTSD Psychedelics, they're amazing. And thank you guys all for bringing this up. It's amazing. It's amazing work. But what I'd like to ask each and every one of you is PTSD Psychedelics, and how did it merge with you with nature?
How do psychedelics merge with human nature?
No, just nature, not human nature, nature itself.
I'm just going to, that is not nature. Everything that's in existence, oil spills, everything comes from nature. It's all. Psilocybin comes from, everything is from nature. As far as I can tell, I think we're all from the remnants of exploding stars. Like everything we see, it's all nature. And I think that's probably one of the bigger problems that we have, is like this big disconnect between we are this and nature is that. And I think if we can understand that we are all, we just are all, or we're all one, that there is no disconnect, that maybe we could start to find that deep connection that lines everything. And maybe I think even that disconnection is source of suffering and source of pain. But if you can start, and I hope this isn't like this, I don't know what this is, I hope it's okay for you, but there is no disconnect. We just are, and you are me and I am you. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, that probably was not helpful at all.
Can we get a round of applause for our 4 panelists? Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like just a quick moment for these guys to go down. Where can we find you? I'm not sure, do we have anything? Oh, okay, so if you want specific information about where to find us, over here? Okay, yeah, so if you just want to go down, give people their website, where can they find you on social, all that jazz.
Yeah, Chad at OnlyFans. No, it's mentaljoe.com. Made it super simple. Mentaljoe.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, all those fun social hubs at mentaljoe apparel.
Missionwithin.org.
Follow LEAP, www.leap.cc, Law Enforcement Action Partnership.
psychcuriousjourney.com, which will be live next week, or you can meet me in the back with my books if you want to. You can meet me there as well.
Awesome. And mine is lifewithcatwalsh.com and chip on this. All right, you guys, let's go have some fun, shall we?